All right, so let's dive into this. Looks like we've got some info here about this gaming headset, the Fachixy FC100. And sounds like we're trying to get to the bottom of like what makes a good gaming headset, right? Maybe think about getting one yourself or for someone you know.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got all the product details, the specs, we've got what people are saying about it, and even some notes about their sustainability efforts. So our mission here is to break it all down, figure out the most important parts, and help you understand what this headset is all about and whether or not it actually lives up to the hype.
Yeah, totally. The stuff you sent over gives us a really solid base to work with. From those detailed specs to how folks are using it in the real world. We can kind of like pick apart all the different parts, point out what really matters, and then see what this specific headset tells us about where gaming audio is at right now.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The Fachixy SE100. So at its heart, this is a wired over-ear gaming headset. And it's designed to work with like a whole bunch of your devices, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Switch, PC laptops, tablets, even your phone with that standard 3.5 millimeter audio jack.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of really important things to keep in mind right away. First, if you're still using an Xbox 360, this isn't going to be plug and play. You'll need some sort of adapter or workaround.
Right.
And this is key, that USB port. That's only for the RGB lighting. It doesn't handle any of the audio. So this isn't like a purely USB headset solution.
Yeah, that's really important to clarify. A lot of devices nowadays use USB for both power and audio, so it's easy to assume that.
Right.
But the fact that this uses the 3.5 millimeter jack for audio across all these platforms really shows that they're focusing on compatibility with that traditional connection.
Exactly. All right, let's talk sound quality. So Fachixy's really pushing their 50 millimeter high-density dual neodymium audio drivers. And they're promising stereo surround sound. They say it's going to give you this super immersive gaming experience, really lifelike audio, and should be great, whether you're into sports games or like those intense shooters or racing games.
Right.
But when they start throwing around terms like high-density dual neodymium, what does that really mean for the listener? Like, what are we going to actually hear?
So the interesting thing here is that they specifically went with neodymium magnets, and these magnets are really powerful but also lightweight. So it lets the drivers be both really responsive but also efficient. And then when they say dual configuration, that means there's a dedicated driver in each ear cup, so you get that true stereo separation. And that high density part, that probably means the magnetic structure is more optimized, which could lead to a clearer and more detailed sound across all the frequencies.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that promise of immersive and realistic audio really comes down to how well these drivers can actually deliver that wide range of sounds accurately.
Yeah, and you can't really call it a gaming headset without a microphone, right?
Right.
This one has an adjustable omnidirectional microphone, and it's got noise-canceling technology built in. The idea is to get clear voice communication while blocking out all that background noise. And it can rotate 120 degrees, so you can get it positioned just right. So just based on what they're saying, how effective do you think this noise cancellation will be for someone who's, trying to chat in a loud environment?
So if we think about how microphones work, the omnidirectional pattern means it's picking up sound from all around. So how well that excellent noise control function actually works really depends on what technology they're using. Are they passively blocking sound waves? Are they actively canceling noise with microphones? Or is it some combination of both?
Right.
Without knowing that, it's hard to say for sure. And generally, even the best noise cancellation can have trouble with like those sudden, really loud noises. But it should definitely help with things like consistent background hums or fan noise, which will make your voice clearer.
Okay.
And being able to adjust it is definitely a good practical feature. It means you can get that microphone in the perfect spot to pick up your voice.
All right, let's talk about how this headset connects to your gaming setup. So compatibility, it seems like a big focus for them with that standard 3.5 millimeter audio jack. And they even throw in a splitter cable and a pretty long extension cable,
Yeah.
which adds a lot of flexibility. But with so many ways to connect these days, what are the pros and cons of using that wired 3.5 millimeter connection?
That's a good question. It really depends on what you as a gamer prioritize. So a big advantage of wired, especially for competitive gaming, is lower latency.
That's
the delay between like you doing something in the game and hearing the sound. And a wired connection usually gives you a more direct signal. Plus, you don't have to worry about batteries dying on you. But the obvious downside is that you're literally tethered to your device. Not as much freedom to move around.
Right.
And even though that 3.5 millimeter jack works with a ton of stuff, it might not have some of the fancier audio processing or customization you'd get with USB or wireless connections on certain platforms. So it's kind of a trade-off,
Yeah.
universal compatibility versus those potentially more advanced features you might find on specific platforms.
Good points. Okay, so for folks who like their gear to look cool, the FC100 has this cool RGB light strip design, and it gets power from a separate USB connection. They say the lighting's dynamic, it changes, and it's really vibrant and eye-catching. Could be good for recording or streaming. But besides just looking cool, are there any, functional benefits to having RGB on a headset?
I mean, for the most part, it's really just aesthetics. You get to personalize it, and it can definitely make your setup look nicer, especially if your other gear has RGB too.
Right.
For streamers, it can make their stream look more visually engaging. It's not very common for RGB lighting on a headset to actually do anything related to the gameplay itself, especially when it's powered separately from the audio, so in this case, it seems to be all about the looks.
All right. Makes sense. So let's talk user-friendliness. So this headset has a rotary volume control and a one-button microphone mute, all right there on the ear cup. Sounds pretty convenient to make quick adjustments without having to, pause your game and mess around in menus. In your experience, how intuitive are those types of on-headset controls?
Generally speaking, having those controls directly on the headset is a really good design choice. It's convenient.
Yeah.
A rotary volume wheel is usually really easy to use just by feel. You can make quick, precise adjustments. And having a dedicated mute button is great for when you need to, mute yourself quickly.
Right.
The important thing for good on-ear controls is where they're placed and how easy it is to find them by touch, especially when you're in the middle of a game and can't really look at them. It sounds like they put those frequently used functions in a spot that's easy to reach, which is definitely good for the user.
Okay, so let's talk about comfort. This is super important, especially for those long gaming sessions.
Yeah, definitely.
So the FC100 is designed to be comfortable. They say the headband is really lightweight, only 0.66 pounds, and the earmuffs are made with this skin-friendly and breathable sponge and leather. And it's supposed to be ergonomic, which means it should reduce pressure and even block out a lot of external sound. They're claiming 85%.
Wow.
So for our listeners out there, especially those who wear glasses, how do those design choices usually affect comfort, especially over long periods of time?
Having a lightweight design is a big deal. It really helps prevent fatigue if you're gaming for hours. And the material they use for the ear pads is also really important. Sin-friendly and breathable means they're trying to prevent heat and moisture from building up, which can get uncomfortable. A lot of times they use leatherette because it's good at isolating sound, but it can sometimes be less breathable than fabric. The ergonomic design, which focuses on cushioning those pressure points, especially around your ears, is also key. And for people who wear glasses, the shape and padding of the ear cups is super important.
Yeah.
If the ear ducts are too tight or don't have the right shape, they can press the arms of your glasses against your head, and that can be really uncomfortable.
Right.
That 89% noise isolation they're claiming suggests a pretty tight fit and probably dense materials. So that could be a trade-off between how immersive the sound is and how comfortable they are to wear for a long time, especially if it's hot.
Makes sense. All right, let's get into some of the technical specs. We're looking at a 32 ohm impedance sound isolation noise control, a frequency response of 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and of course that 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So for everyone listening, what do these numbers tell us about how this headset will perform?
So 32 ohms is a pretty low impedance, which is good.
Okay.
It means you can get a decent volume out of the headset using most devices, your phone, your laptop, your console controller. You won't need a separate amp. That 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz frequency range is pretty standard. It's basically the range of human hearing. So the headset should be able to reproduce all the sounds we can hear, but it's important to remember that just because it covers that range doesn't tell you everything about the quality of the sound. Things like how accurate the frequency response is, how much distortion there is, how clear the audio is, all that contributes to the listening experience.
Okay.
And when they mention sound isolation here, they're probably talking about that physical design of the ear cups blocking outside noise again.
All right, then let's get into some specifics about the product itself. So this is a Fachixy FC100. It comes in green, has that over-ear design we've been talking about, and it comes in a box.
Right.
It weighs 280 grams, which is a little under 10 ounces. And one practical thing to note, it's not water resistant, so maybe keep your drinks away from it while you're gaming.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
That weight seems about average for a wired over-ear headset with these kinds of features. And the box packaging is pretty standard, too. And not being water resistant is pretty typical for electronics meant to be used indoors.
Right.
All right, so let's see what the gaming community thinks about this headset. The Fachixy FC100 has a customer rating of 4.1 out of 5 stars, and that's based on over 3,300 reviews.
Wow.
So that's a lot of feedback. And what's really interesting is that it's ranked pretty high in certain video game categories. Like it's a top choice for Mac and PlayStation headsets. This tells us that a lot of users are having good experiences even without us looking at each individual review right now.
Right.
And doing well specifically with Mac and PlayStation users suggests it's really good in areas that matter to them. Maybe it integrates really well or has audio features specifically for those consoles, or maybe it's just super comfortable for how those users typically play. This kind of targeted success tells you more than just a general positive rating.
Yeah, definitely. 4.1 stars with over 3,300 reviews means a lot of people are happy with it, and those bestseller rankings, especially for specific platforms, are really telling.
Yeah.
It means the headset isn't just okay, it's actually meeting or maybe even exceeding what people expect from a headset for those specific gaming systems. And while reading individual reviews would give us more detail, these overall indicators paint a pretty good picture of how people are responding to the FC100.
Okay, so there's something I found really interesting. They're saying this headset has sustainability features recognized by trusted certifications. And get this, they're claiming that the carbon emissions from the entire life cycle of this headset were measured, reduced, and then offset. So for someone who cares about the environment, what does that actually mean? Like, what does it take to measure, reduce, and offset carbon emissions for a product like this?
So it shows that some manufacturers are starting to take their environmental impact really seriously.
Hmm.
Measured means they actually calculated the total greenhouse gas emissions from the headset, and that includes everything. The raw materials, the energy used to make it transportation, how you use it, and even what happens to it when you're done with it. Reduced means they took steps to lower those emissions. Maybe they used more sustainable materials, made their production process more energy efficient, or even optimized their packaging to create less waste and reduce emissions from shipping.
Okay.
And offset means that for any emissions they couldn't eliminate, they invested in projects that remove the same amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Things like planting trees or supporting renewable energy.
Wow.
And those trusted certifications are important because they mean that someone independent has verified these efforts. It gives more credibility to their claims.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What have we learned about the Fachixy FC100? It seems like a pretty solid, all-around gaming headset. It's compatible with a lot of different devices, thanks to that 3.5mm jack. They're focusing on sound quality with those neodymium drivers, and the adjustable noise-canceling mic should give you clear communication. Comfort seems to be a big priority, too, with the lightweight designs and those breathable materials. And then you've got that customizable RGB lighting, if you're into that. And the reviews are good. It's a bestseller, especially for Mac and PlayStation. So it seems like a lot of gamers are happy with it. But there are some things to consider before you buy. It's wired, so keep that in mind. And remember what we said about compatibility with the Xbox 360 and how that USB port only works for lighting?
And this is what I think is really cool. The fact that they're highlighting their sustainability efforts, it really makes you think. When you're buying your next piece of tech, how important is it to you that the company cares about the environment? And could this push for eco-friendly products change how gaming gear is designed and what people choose to buy in the future? I think that's something worth considering.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
Thanks for having me.
This is great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right, everyone, that's it for our deep dive into the Fachixy FC100 Gaming Headset. Hope you learned something new. Until next time, happy gaming.